Welcome to Driven Together, the podcast where ambition meets balance, and we explore what it really takes to design a life you love.
We're your hosts. I'm Kim, a business owner and recruiter who thrives on helping people connect with their dream opportunities.
And I'm Justin, a tech sales manager. Together, we're not just a husband and wife team, we're also proud parents to two amazing kids who are about to enter their teenage years.
In this podcast, we'll share how we work backwards from the lifestyle that we want, sometimes using unconventional approaches to building wealth, staying healthy, and creating a life of purpose.
So whether you're a career chaser, a family juggler, or someone who just wants to live a little more intentionally, this podcast is for you.
This is Driven Together. Welcome everyone to Driven Together with Kim and Justin. And today we're going to talk about our pets, the costs, and of course the benefits of having pets. We're going to talk about, first of all, our own pets. So we've got three. We've got Lulu. She's a 6-year-old Labrador. She's black. She's super cute. Very, very friendly. Justin, she's pretty much your dog. So would you like to describe Lulu?
Yeah, so Lulu we acquired about 6 years ago from a breeder, and I've always wanted a dog that I could exercise with, but also a dog that is considered friendly, good with family, kids, and I think we did decide on ultimately a golden retriever, a Labrador, and I know that you also mentioned that you wanted a Pomeranian,
Yes, because I used to.
and I feel like at the time I didn't want to get caught walking a Pomeranian.
A little fluffy.
I also don't think a Pomeranian can run 2 kilometers. So anyway, so we settled on a Labrador named Lulu, and I think maybe the bond with me started because when she was young, it was always me taking her out for walks or runs, and it's always been me really ever since to feed her and play with her. And yeah, I think the bond is based on me obviously spending the most time with her ever since she was a puppy. I also took her to puppy training when she was a puppy. But no, look, obviously you guys have a really good bond with her as well, right?
Yeah, look, we do take her out for walks as well, me and the girls. And you're absolutely right. Like in terms of like that typical family dog, like how could you go past a Labrador? That's our Lulu, super great with the kids. Sienna absolutely loves her. There have been some moments where, they've snuck a sleep over in Sienna's room, and yeah, look, I would trust her with the kids at all times. She's such a fantastic dog. And I think with Lulu, she was our very first dog as a family. And when you say that we got her from a breeder, it was actually just a person whose dogs had puppies. We didn't go looking for some elite, Labrador breeder when it came to getting Lulu. But we can't fault her in any way. She's a healthy, happy dog who absolutely is obsessed with Justin. So that is our dog Lulu.
Just before we move on
Yeah.
to the next ones, I know that this was my, I mean, I've had pets, but I've never had a cat or a dog growing up. So this for me was a very new experience when we first got Lulu. But I know you're quite experienced. You've had many dogs and cats growing up. I suppose my question is, as an experienced dog and cat owner, did it still feel like something new, having a dog with your own family versus
Yeah.
when it was back when you were obviously living with your
Yeah, I think that with Lulu, I got the chance to raise her the way I wanted to raise her. And, you get to make all the rules with Lulu at home. So when I had dogs growing up. My parents never let them in the house. They were always in the backyard, and Lulu, she's always been inside from day one. She's always slept inside. She slept in a crate, and we got to feed her really, yeah, really great food from the beginning. So I think that's what we've done very differently with her. We've really pampered all of our pets, but we've raised them very differently to how I would have raised my pets growing up.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me, I never felt the bond that people had with animals growing up. I never had a, like I said, I never had a dog or a cat, and I really underestimated how much one could, love an animal, not having that experience as a child. And the other surprising thing is how difficult it is to, and challenging, but also very rewarding. But it is hard earning and raising a pet to the best of your ability. And we can obviously talk a bit more about that in terms of how our daily lives look like having not one, but three pets in the household.
Three very pampered pets in the household. So yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right there. Shall we talk about Gucci or Gooch the Smooch?
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about how we actually came to know Gucci. So I think it was a random weekend and we decided, why don't we visit the pound just for a just for just to look at some of the animals. We weren't intending to bring anyone home. And so we visited the pound over in Blacktown and we saw a number of cats. I remember the kids were there too. And I know that you and the kids obviously wanted a pet, but going into the pound, we decided that we're not going to come home with another pet. And you know me, when things enter my brain that I want it straight away. Um, yeah, so we saw the first cat. It wasn't actually Gucci. It was um another cat called we called that cat Dollar Bill, and we decided to bring him home that day. And unfortunately, as you know, he got sick, and
Really sick.
unfortunately, yeah, and we had to bring him back to the pound. We're obviously inexperienced with raising a cat, so we were a bit worried that maybe we weren't capable enough to ensure that he remains healthy and safe. But yeah, the good thing is as well that I believe Dollar Bill is fine. But we also were able to then meet now Gucci, which we ended up taking home.
Yeah. So, to give everyone a bit of background with Gucci and what was going on at Black Animal Rehoming Centre at that time, they had a massive influx of cats for adoption, and cats that weekend were actually essentially on sale for $50. So that's how much we got Gucci for. She's a medium hair, a domestic medium hair cat, and she's just absolutely beautiful. She's got, white markings and a silver tabby coat. She looks absolutely stunning and she's very, very photogenic. Many people have asked me whether she's like some exotic breed, but the answer is no. She's just a rescue cat, and unfortunately was abandoned at the pound because the family that owned her previously were being evicted from their home and they couldn't secure another property that allowed them to have pets. So Gucci, along with her mom and her sister, were put up for adoption. And the moment we saw her, we were like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful cat. And she was super social, super friendly, incredibly gentle. We got the chance to meet her and a few other cats and see how they interacted with kids. And Gucci just stood out immediately, and she still does. She's fantastic with the family and puts up with a lot from the kids. And also whoever's visiting, and my niece and nephew absolutely love her as well. So that's the story of Gucci. So she's essentially a rescue cat from the pound and just the most gentle calm little cat who we absolutely love and, sleeps in the bed with us a lot of the time. So that's
Mm. But I remember the Lulu and Gucci weren't the best of friends when we first brought home
no,
the cat. They were
yeah.
a bit, I think Lulu was maybe a little bit unsure, and obviously Gucci, being a cat, was quite intimidated by the size of this other creature in the household.
Yeah, I think Lulu always thought that she was a toy to be chased. And at that time, Lulu was a year old. So just going through that teen stage, adolescent stage, Labrador with a cat probably was a challenging combination. But the
Yeah.
two of them get along perfectly fine now. They just sort of ignore and avoid each other. And yeah, no problems with those two. Okay. And our third pet is Ted,
Troublemaker.
the troublemaker. So Ted is now turning 5 this year in October. So out of all of our pets, he was the most costly. Still is the most costly, and we'll reveal a little bit more about that later. But Ted, we bought him as a pedigree Rottweiler, 3.5 grand from a pretty reputable breeder, champion bloodline, beautiful looking dog. And what can we say about Teddy? He's he's quite a guy.
So I think initially we wanted another dog, but we weren't sure which breed. From memory, you were okay with maybe even another Labrador, maybe a Golden Retriever, and I think my ego kicked in, and I've always wanted this big, scary dog to sort of go with my thoughts of myself being this, this guy who likes going to the gym, who's trying to be massive as well. So there's a little bit of that insecurity or ego that I wanted to project into the world, and I thought, okay, what's better than having a Rottweiler right by your side?
Yeah,
And I'll tell you now, it's not always the right reason to buy a pet.
you
But look,
don't
I'll
buy a
obviously
dog by the looks.
yeah, and I'll tell you now, it's probably the one of the most challenging things, but raising children that I've ever had, will still continue to have.
Mm.
They're not an easy breed to raise. But yeah, I mean, we can obviously go into that more a bit later.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess how would we describe Teddy and his unique personality?
I would say he has very, very kind heart. He is very attached to us as his parents. He just wants to impress. He can be a little bit anxious at times.
Mm,
I think he doesn't know that he's actually a massive dog and that no one or nothing can actually hurt him. But I think deep down inside, he's actually a little baby.
absolutely. Yeah, and he is just the most affectionate dog and super affectionate, especially when it comes to his mama. I still remember picking him up from the breeder as I would like to say tiny puppy, but tiny puppies are not 7.5 kilos when they're 8 weeks old. He was actually already very heavy, very huge from the beginning. But I just remember picking him up in my arms the first time we went to take him home, and he was just like licking me all over the face and just following me around everywhere from day one. And he is just, yeah, the ultimate snuggle bug. He lives up to his name, Ted. He is a teddy bear, especially when it comes to mum and all the cuddles that she gives him. But I think ultimately he's a Rottweiler. He's extremely protective. As you mentioned, it could be a bit of anxiety there, but he's extremely protective, extremely loyal to his family. So we do need to, make sure that we control that aspect of him. Okay. Well, this podcast is about the costs and benefits of having pets. So maybe we could talk about, what are the typical costs associated with pets, starting with something pretty obvious, which is what they eat. And, these are not little dogs that we have. Maybe we could talk about how much we're often spending on their food.
Yeah, when we first had Lulu, we've got to know a number of different vets and also read a lot of literature around what we should feed our animals. And similar look, obviously we're not qualified vets or pet nutritionists, but I just find that if I'm going to feed myself, like what am I going to eat? What would I eat? Would I put highly processed food in my stomach? I would love not to. If I have the choice, I would like to eat whole foods, fruit, veg, protein, etc. Things that aren't packaged, preferably. And I just took that same sort of opinion or that same concept and introduced it to the pets that we have. So what we feed them are essentially foods that we would eat, except they're raw. So would go to the butcher and I would go to the butcher, and typically the market's quite cheap. They stock a lot of parts of animals that humans don't generally eat a lot of, therefore it's quite cheap. So things like hearts or offal or chicken frames, for example. Often, if you've got a good relationship with your butcher, they might just give you the box of chicken frames for free, or even for $5 for 10 kilos. I've experienced that in the past. So it's actually not as expensive as most people think.
Mm.
And what I do, so I'll buy a month worth of food, so 30 days worth of food that would be shared amongst Ted, Lulu, and Gucci. Obviously, Ted would consume probably half of that, or maybe even more, maybe 60% of that quota for the month. He is 53 kilos, I think, whilst Lulu's, 26, 27 kilos, and obviously Gucci's, under 5 kilos.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, so a whole month of food, we basically do food meal prep. We put it into freezer bags and we put it in a massive box freezer outside. And it costs us roughly around $250 to $300 a month. So I don't know how others compare to that, but for me, that's actually quite cheap, and they're eating human grade food.
Yeah. 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 I think that for us coming back to Sydney, we realized that that's not too bad, because we used to spend quite a bit more when we were living in Luxembourg, feeding them the same type of
Yeah,
diet.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, really good overview around their food, and yeah, I guess the sentiment around it. We want our pets having human grade stuff, essentially a very protein-rich diet. And in addition to that, we would give them some vegetables and carbohydrates on top of that. So you typically make a bit of a veggie smoothie to put on top of the dog's raw food, and they'll go and eat that. And we like to feed our dogs their food frozen, completely frozen, because both Lulu and Ted, but more so Lulu, they just demolish their food and within seconds. Like, these two dogs just go through their food so quickly. And we found that by freezing their food and forcing them to actually chew through their food, allow them to sort of really slow down their eating and properly digest their food. So that's one of the other things that we do with them.
And also previously when we only had Lulu, we didn't freeze the food. We'd keep it just in the fridge, which meant that it wouldn't last very long and you're going to have to do meal preps more often. So we found out if we just freeze everything, put it into individual bags, yes, you're spending, 3 hours on a Saturday doing their food for the month, but after that, you know, pretty much for the next 30, 31 days, it's pretty easy. Just grab their individual packs, take the food out, put it on their food bowl or on the floor, and they'll just eat that as is.
Yeah.
Whilst the cat, though, Gucci doesn't like frozen, so she's a bit special. She needs it to be defrosted and or left in the fridge.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we give them, some special meals. So
Mm.
from time to time, we'll give the dogs a lamb neck, a massive lamb neck each to chow down, and that takes them a few hours to finish. Surprisingly, with Lulu, she eats that a lot quicker than Ted, and
Mm.
disappears quite quickly, but, a little bit slower than her usual food. Ted likes to take his time and savors his lamb necks and sometimes would hide it. The remaining bits that he doesn't want to finish, he will hide it in the backyard somewhere or dig it up. So that's a bit gross, but that is something that he likes to do. And Gucci, I guess, in terms of more, sort of special meals for her, would you like to tell them what you fed her this week?
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on some of the foods that we buy because, the audience might wonder, okay, like if I'm on a budget, but I want to feed my pets sort of human grade food, for example, raw food, what can I feed them? And obviously, by all means, we're not qualified vets or nutritionists. Obviously, consult a professional. But what we do that saves a lot of money, like I said, cuts of animals that people don't really buy, so hearts and offal and frames. But with Gucci, she loves chicken necks. They're quite cheap at the supermarket. Usually you can get like a small, was it 1 kilo little tray for $4. But yeah, sometimes I'll feed her T-bone if T-bone is on sale and
You'd
just
have
chop
like
that
the
up.
steak.
I'll throw the bone out. I don't feed her the bone. It's too hard for her. And yeah, the cat what I've actually learned about cats, because obviously growing up you think cats eat fish, right? I don't know where we got that.
Mm, mm.
So I always thought cats only like tuna or sardines, which is actually quite silly for me to think because tigers and lions are cats and they'll eat anything that that is protein.
Yeah.
Gucci is the, ultimate carnivore. She'll eat everything and anything that is protein, meat, fish,
Mm, hmm
chicken. She
hmm.
will not obviously eat any plant food, fruits. She won't eat any of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And when you think about it, when cats are out in the wild, so say a domestic cat, goes out into the wild, and this is a big problem with feral cats, that actually go out into the wild and attack native birds. They're one of the biggest threats to native birds, and it makes sense why she loves chicken so much because that is a bird, and she loves her chicken. And yeah, well, when like cats hate water, like why would they go out into a pond and try and catch fish?
So some of the other costs involved in owning a pet, we'll talk about the costs related to getting them overseas and back. But some of the regular costs to consider: insurance. We spend about 200 odd a month for all three. Then you've got training, and that could be a once-off thing. A lot of people recommend if you're going to buy a puppy, that you obviously take them to professional to get that early training
Hmm.
at the start. That could be a once-off, or it could be ongoing if the dog, cats, I don't know if you get training, but anyway, let's just say for dogs, that's just our own experience. If they have behavioral issues, then that could be an ongoing thing. So I would estimate the training that we've spent so far, Lulu, probably around the $500 mark, and that was just a once off at the start.
Hmm.
Gucci, we haven't had to get her to train or to get
Yeah,
training.
she's perfect.
And then Ted, I think as of today, we've probably spent close to $3,000.
Yeah,
And just, yeah. So do you want to explain why? So what happened with Ted? Because he's technically a coronavirus dog. We got him during the COVID pandemic.
yeah. I think that he's possibly one of the most challenging breeds to be raising during a time where there was social distancing and, people avoiding contact with other people and other dogs. A lot of the training schools were shut down for quite some time. And I think with Ted, it was just, that early socialization, we couldn't do as much because it was the midst of the pandemic. So he didn't have as much exposure to other dogs and other people as Lulu did, where there was absolutely no restrictions at that time. And, they were only a year apart, those two. And I think that because of, some of those challenges and getting him properly socialized in those formative early stages, we had a lot of difficulty with Ted going into adolescence. So he was no longer that 7 kilogram puppy that we brought home. We were dealing with a 50 kilo, year old. I would say that between sort of the year old to 18-month mark of having Ted, that was the most challenging period. So he was going through his adolescence, and that's where we started to really encounter some behavioral challenges with him. So he just challenged everyone. I think at that point he knew that he was big and tough, and that if he
Mm.
growled or barked at anything, he was extremely intimidating, and he knew that. So he was challenging everything and everyone, including ourselves. And we really had to, get some serious trainers to help us manage him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we underestimated the raising a Rottweiler, just straight out. I thought, when you watch some of the YouTube the professionals on YouTube, you say, "Oh wow, it's seems so easy, they're well trained, blah blah blah." But especially if you haven't had experience with some of the bigger breeds, it does challenge you, especially a Rottweiler, I think. I've had friends who've owned the other ones, the other sort of the so-called bigger breeds, but Rottweiler, they're so powerful. They are, the moment they want something or they want to chase something. So for example, if Ted was 50, 55 kilos, I reckon he could probably pull twice, at least twice or three times his weight. So if you can't do a seated row, 100 kilo seated row or a standing row in the gym, I think it's gonna be quite challenging to pull a Rottweiler that really wants to chase this rabbit that just ran across the road.
Yeah, which is the reason why I can't walk him, right? Like
Yeah.
on my own.
So yeah, he's obviously had the lack of social exposure, and it wasn't because we didn't choose to, just we weren't allowed, right? We had to stay at home. We couldn't walk. I think there was a period we couldn't even walk outside. There
Mm-hmm.
was like so many restrictions back in, that period. I remember there was a period where we couldn't even walk our dogs, I think. And that was the period of time that you really need to socialize a puppy. He was obviously a puppy still. And I think that contributed to it. He's obviously way better now, way better, and we've obviously got a lot more experience in how to control and how to manage such a large dog. But I think look, the training is going to be an ongoing thing, just like having a personal trainer, for example, if you want to get stronger or lose weight.
Yeah, he's still not perfect, but I think the wonderful thing about Ted is that he's really, really good with people. We had him at the vets very recently, and initially everyone was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, please leave his muzzle on, just in case, just to be safe." They'll knock on the door and make sure that the coast is clear before they'd step in, and they'll be very, very cautious, and understandably so. But within a matter of, within a matter of a day, the muzzle was off, and everybody absolutely loved him and spoke about how delightful he was as a visitor. So yeah, he always wins people over. But I think with Ted, I think what was really important and one of the biggest lessons that we learned from one of our trainers from Luxembourg was that it's so important to set those boundaries and not allow him to feel like the whole space is his. So in the case of our previous house over there, he thought that the whole lounge room, and it was an enormous lounge room and dining room, he thought it was all his because he had free reign and was very, very protective of this space. But one of our trainers actually taught us that, that is what leads to possessive behavior. And he encouraged us to carve out a much smaller space for Ted that he could treat as his own. And we brought that learning over here. And now he actually sleeps in a crate all night, and his crate is his space. So he's very, very respectful whenever other people are in there. And yeah, it's just very different behavior from him. He's much more easily manageable right now. I'm still not the type of dog I would trust with my kids 100% on their own, even though the girls do, sort of sneak in and, give him pats in the morning. But, he's absolutely delightful, and our kids love him to death. And, you know, he's so grateful to have Teddy. So sweet.
Yeah. So let's finish some of the costs. So some of the other costs that is probably good to account for if you would like to own a pet. So you've got the various vet visits, vaccinations. Obviously, they're going to get sick here and there. Hopefully, most of that gets covered by insurance, but my understanding is that some insurers you obviously still have to pay some out of pocket, potentially, depends on the level that you get in terms of insurance. Then accessories like crates, toys, bowls, just various accessories. So you want to factor that in, and you're going to obviously have to replace them here and there. And then what else?
Cat
Dog
litter.
collars, litter trays,
Yeah.
so these things, they're not cheap.
But the
Like
Apple AirTag on our cat, who is
yeah,
a bit of
yeah,
an escape artist at times.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And look, there might be a situation where, they get sick and maybe it's not covered by
Hmm.
insurance for some reason. I don't know. Maybe your level of cover wasn't high enough, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I'd probably factor in even more buffer for, that instance. And hopefully, knock on wood, that your pet is healthy throughout most of its life. But I've heard stories, things like cancer and stuff are happening, like cruciate ligament issues, and I know that they could be quite expensive. So I think having a pet, I think a lot of people, in my opinion, downplay. I certainly did the cost, the time. So we haven't even mentioned time. Like if you
Yeah.
work in a job where you get paid based on your time, I don't know, do you factor that in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really important point about, what you need to account for when owning pets, or in our case, being crazy enough to own three. And those costs can really add up, because there have been situations, right, where our pets not only had to visit a vet, but they actually had to stay overnight, a few nights at an animal hospital, and those vet bills could rack up really, really quickly depending on
Mm,
what needs to be done and the seriousness of the
mm,
issue. Ted's been in hospital twice, very recently 3 days. Before that, he was there 5 nights when we were overseas. And, that definitely added up very, very quickly around the treatments and the scans. And the bigger your dog, the more higher the dosages of various things, and the cost of, sedation, and the cost of doing a procedure on a very large dog versus a really small dog varies vastly. So, you need to be able to account for that. We've had one emergency trip as well with Lulu when she was very young and ate something that she shouldn't have, which is very, very common for Labradors. And, that was an emergency vet visit very, very late at night. So, yeah, you need to be able to plan for those types of situations for sure, having a dog or, yeah, having a pet.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to pay the bill first before you're able to claim. So I know
Hmm.
that there's some vets can do the gap only, where you can essentially claim right then and there, and you'll just have to pay the difference or the gap. But some you have to pay up front. So having that buffer in place, that where you're required to pay up front and then make that claim. If you don't have the funds though, so it is, all these things you have to consider. I know it's hard sometimes because, you go to the pound or you visit a breeder and they look so cute and healthy and all that, but there'll come that time.
Hmm. Yeah, of
Even
course.
Lulu, knock on wood, Lulu is one of the healthiest dogs, never had really many issues. But yeah, like you mentioned, she ate a foreign object, so, it's not even really health related.
Hmm.
But accidents happen, and yeah, you need to factor that in.
Yeah.
But yeah, the biggest expense so far, and we can talk about it now, we spent a number of years living overseas in Luxembourg, and we weren't going to leave our pets behind. So we relocated them overseas. And on the way back as well, we obviously brought them back to Australia. Did you want me to go into detail in terms of like
Yeah.
what the costs were related to, etc.?
Yeah, before we go into that, I want to break down what that journey actually meant for our dogs, right? So, for humans, we hop on a plane, get to our destination. It's all very straightforward. We went to Dubai, then we went from Dubai to Luxembourg. Very simple. For our pets, they actually flew out a couple of days after we did. So, they first had to go from Sydney to Doha. And then from Doha, they went to Frankfurt. And then from Frankfurt, by plane, they had to go to Luxembourg then by car. So that was a journey on the way to
Out of
Luxembourg,
Australia.
out of Australia. And then for them to come back to Australia, it was a reverse plus more. So they had to go from Luxembourg, driven to Frankfurt, from Frankfurt, take a flight to Doha, from Doha, fly all the way to
There's
Melbourne because there
Melbourne,
is
yes.
no
Quite.
quarantine center in Sydney anymore. And then from Melbourne, they had to get driven to Sydney. So, yeah, it was quite a
Mm,
journey. I think
yeah.
even more painful, like on the way back home because of that quarantine period where they had to stay for 10 days. Unfortunately, only 10 days for us because they were Australian born pets. They had all the vaccinations all up to date, so they didn't need to spend longer than the 10 days, and then they had to make that
Mm,
journey to
mm,
Sydney eventually.
yeah. Yeah. So I think if you're thinking of moving overseas or considering taking a job overseas, or you just have a dream of being an expat, it's one consideration. And there's many countries in the world that I think particular Rottweiler, there's actually some countries that have banned. I can't talk about the countries because it's obviously changing all the time, I think. So that's something to consider as well. And also coming back to Australia, the process of getting them repatriated, or even if you got if I believe, my understanding is even harder if your pet was born overseas, not in Australia, and you're trying to get them to Australia. The process takes ages just to kickstart the process. It takes many, many, many months. You've got to plan for that. And also the quarantine, as Kim mentioned, you're paying for that. It's not a tax funded thing. You're paying for their stay in Melbourne.
Mhm.
But yeah, in terms of the total cost I've got the number here, but it's give or take 2 grand. It's probably around $45,000, I think we've spent.
It-
And that
Back and
includes
forth, right?
all the transportation, all the vaccinations, the couriers and all that. And it was actually a pleasant process. We've had really good help. And something to also consider is, obviously there was a hiccup, you're delaying your flight. Like this, we're lucky none of that happened.
Mm.
But I did have backup just in case, okay, knock on wood, one of them gets sick, they can't fly.
Mm.
You've got to, they're gonna the they're gonna have to book another plane ticket, right? And cancel that ticket, book another plane ticket. That plane is leaving. They're not gonna wait for your pet. So there's so many things that could potentially go wrong,
Yep.
especially, with just one pet. Imagine having multiple pets. I wouldn't do it again, not just because of the cost. It was the most stressful process because you're
Mm.
thinking, oh, what about if this happens? What if a few days earlier, a few days prior to when they leave, one of them gets seriously ill, and
Yeah.
then your plans go outside the window because you also need to leave the country, and also the paperwork just takes
Yeah.
too much time out of your day, and a lot of the time you can't do it during the weekends. You've got to take time off work, so
Yeah.
all those costs add up. So it's not just 45,000. That's $45,000 on the invoice. But what about all the times that you had to
Yeah.
take off for work and all that.
And also, it feels like it takes a village to get a dog to relocate or pets to relocate. We were very lucky, as you say, to have worked with some really great experts. So we actually used a pet travel specialist to assist us back and forth. But we also had fantastic vets that helped us along the process. And that was really, really valuable in a place like Luxembourg, where there are so many different languages that come into play in the process. So we were very lucky to have a vet that spoke English. She spoke French as well, but, fluent in English, who understood the process very well. But, even some of those lab tests, etc., that we had to submit along with their paperwork to travel, they were being done in Germany, some things were being done in Luxembourg, and then our pet relocation expert was located in the Netherlands. So, there was just so much to balance on that end too, which made things complicated, but we were very fortunate we had some great assistance. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
anything for our pets, they are our family, and 100%, they will be wherever we are.
So I've just calculated everything that I can think of that we had to so far have spent on them. And so this is what, a span of 6 years. So our first pet we had about what, 6 years, almost 6 years ago. So I'd probably say it's around the 90K so far. Now, of course, we're a special case. Not everyone is going to go overseas. Not everyone's going to have three pets. Not everyone's going to have a Rottweiler. So, that's based on, three pets, one that's quite challenging, quite a large dog, and then obviously moving overseas and moving back. So yes, of course, okay, but it's a special case. I wouldn't think that there's going to be many in the population that would have gone through the same journey. So if you take away the moving overseas bit, yeah, probably around the 50,000 dollars so far in what, 5.5, 6 years.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not cheap.
No.
I mean, that's almost a house deposit.
Yeah, definitely. Luckily, like our pets, apart from, a couple of instances, they're overall healthy and don't require any ongoing treatment and medications. So that's good. Okay, well, let's change the tone a bit. Let's talk about the benefits of having a pet. Because when you talk about the costs, I would easily spend that money all over again if we had to. Like, no questions about it. For me, like, it's money well spent all the
Mm.
time. Let's talk about the benefits of having a pet. So, for me, it's all the priceless things. It's all the love, the affection, all the positivity and the joy you have seeing your pets every day. I don't think anything in life could beat that experience. And we're very fortunate to have three. Also, like with our cat, she is just the most calming presence in our home. And, whenever you're having a hard day from work, hard day from school, they just calm you down. Like,
Mm.
I know that pet owners, they know what I mean when I say this stuff. So like those are just the intangible, priceless things that a pet brings into your life. And also, look, with pets, not only do they have, those emotional benefits, they've got physical benefits as well. So people that are said to have dogs have much better cardiovascular health than most people. And that's not surprising given, your own routine with Lulu.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, other than the ones that you mentioned, having especially a Labrador, and I know Labrador owners out there know how this feels. If you don't exercise your Labrador, yeah, they go crazy, particularly in the winter. Not so much in the summer. It's quite hot, so I don't really run her too far, especially when it's earlier in the day. But having a Labrador has meant that I've got to do some aerobic exercise at least once a day, and we're talking, 3 to 5 kilometers. In the winter, she can easily do 10 to 15, especially in really cold weather. She can
Hmm.
probably do half marathons. We're
Hmm.
talking a pretty good pace,
Hmm.
6 minute per K. Like she's really fit.
Hmm.
And when I'm not running fast enough, she's pulling,
Mm.
which is awesome for my running regime. But yeah, with Ted on the flip side, I've got to make sure I maintain my strength.
Yeah.
So Lulu ensures that I maintain my aerobic and cardiovascular fitness,
Hmm.
whereas Ted ensures that I need to maintain my muscle power and strength, because if he sees a bush turkey, that's
Gosh.
150 kilos of force that's going to be pulling me. I've got to make sure that I could pull that much weight.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm having to go to the gym and working on my strength, to be as strong as I can. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to walk him.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think physically for me is one of the biggest benefits. And but luckily, I enjoy any of that. I enjoy all that stuff before having the pets. But it just makes it now that I have to do it. Otherwise, yeah, they're not going to be happy dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that having pets as well, they're just so amazing in terms of the lessons they teach kids. So, look, first of all, our kids don't pick up their poop. They don't do anything like that. But, they do take some responsibility. They are in charge of, say, Gucci's water bowl, making sure that that's filled up every day. They do take, some responsibility playing with them, keeping them company. And I think that above all with our kids, having the pets has really, shown them how to be compassionate towards animals, things that, can't express, what they're really feeling or, what they're really experiencing in life. I think they've both become really, really compassionate kids towards animal welfare by nature, by simply being exposed to their own pets. And yeah, they're very passionate about animals. Our eldest daughter wants to be a vet one day, and she's absolutely obsessed with animals. Yeah, there was even one time, remember, when we were in Luxembourg and we went to visit a farm, there was a baby goat that just left such an impression on her. She thought it was the cutest thing ever. And then we went looking at some of the other animals. She then encountered that same baby goat, a couple of minutes later, maybe 20 minutes later, and that baby goat just went running after her and wanting to get pats from her. And it just made such an impression on our eldest daughter. And she's since refused to touch anything goat. So no feeding her goat ever in her life. She just keeps thinking about that baby goat. So it's just turned her into a really compassionate individual when it came to the welfare of goats. So yeah, yeah. So it's definitely taught the kids that quality. Okay, now moving towards the end of the podcast and this episode. Justin, I wanted to ask you, will you ever have another pet?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that. It's tough. I would say, look, obviously, I've I've learnt to really love dogs and cats, but definitely dogs since this was the first time having dogs or cats in my life.
I know
That
that
it's
we spoke quite a bit about
so
like our love for travel and
yeah,
having the
yeah.
pets is a challenge when it
Look,
comes to traveling.
yeah. I mean, look, you're asking a very logical person, a rational person that's, I think, analytical, I think numbers. I think my financial brain probably says to me, you've got three beautiful pets, just love them, and that time will come. So enjoy the moments with them now, right? And make sure that they live the best life, which that's what I strive to do every day. But when that time comes, do I want to do that again? Look, maybe. I would say maybe. Like you said, travel is really high on our priority list. It's really hard to travel with pets. I actually forgot about one cost,
Kennel cost.
boarding fees. So we've been traveling quite a bit over the last 3, 4 years. So I'd probably add another 30K onto that number that I mentioned earlier. Now,
Hmm.
like I said, not everyone's going to travel the amount of times that we traveled over the last 3 years. So I wouldn't say it's really an indicative number. But
Mm.
if you are traveling, then it's not cheap. Now, I know that it's probably because, we've obviously got two dogs and a cat, and also we've got Ted who, it's really hard to have just a random person to look after a Rottweiler. You really need to have a lot of experience. So that's why it's expensive. But no, what I was going to say is traveling is high on our priority list, and having pets, it's really hard to do that because I don't want to leave them for too long. I don't want to. I feel
Mm-hmm.
bad. I feel sorry. So it does take a little bit of a backseat sometimes. We're not traveling as often as we would like, even though we've traveled a lot. I would love to travel even more, but we just can't say, okay, next week we're going to the Gold Coast.
Mm.
If we didn't
Mm-hmm.
obviously have pets, it's a lot easier. We can just pack our bags and leave, right?
Mm.
I haven't really answered your question, have I? I don't know. I might. Maybe a little bulldog or something. I don't know.
If
I
I
don't know.
bought a little
Tough.
Frenchie home, you'll be like,
Maybe.
okay, I'll look after it.
Maybe. Yeah,
And
maybe.
it
Look,
would.
Rottweilers and Labradors, they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Labradors, the physical, spending a lot of time
Activity.
with them, like walking and running. And then with Rottweiler being such a massive dog, there's different challenges there. So maybe a French bulldog. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. And I think it's just clear what my answer would be. Like, would I have another pet? 100%. I would have another pet right now. If you took me to the pound and said that I could have another cat, 100% in a heartbeat. I've been wanting another one for a long, long time. And with another dog, of course, 100%, I would
Mm,
have another dog. I could even imagine like if I had a choice, I'll have like a farm just full of animals, not just dogs and cats. I'll have like goats and sheep and horses if I could. But then of course there is that added difficulty of travel, as you mentioned. I love to travel, and of course, if you ever had a farm, you can't just up and leave.
mm. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what though, and definitely with dogs, you come home, they're always gonna be excited to see you.
Hmm.
Sometimes our kids aren't excited to see us, but our dogs, like the moment, like we could be gone for 5 minutes, and it seems like they haven't seen us for years. Tail wagging, looking up at us, just wanting us to play with them or feed them or something. They're always keen to just hang out. I think that makes it all worth it, definitely. And look,
100%.
anyone who owns a dog can probably relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. They're incredible. And I think I also wanted to wrap up things today with an important message around, considering adopting a dog or a cat. I feel very lucky that we've had the opportunity to raise our pets and pamper our pets. But the reality is, every dog and every cat deserves that treatment. And, we've had the opportunity to do a rescue with Gucci, and we absolutely can't imagine life without her. So there are a lot of pets out there that have sadly been abandoned, like her, and they all deserve a loving home. So, if you are thinking about getting a pet, think rescue, think adoption first. Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Well, look, that wraps up today's episode. I hope everyone has enjoyed learning a little bit more about our own beloved pets, and give your own pets a cuddle from both Justin and I. So thank you so much for listening to Driven Together.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode of Driven Together, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might relate. Watch for new episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much.